Welcome to The Patient Physician, a space for doctors to explore their physical, mental, and financial wellness. Your peers and industry leaders will destigmatize institutional perceptions while redefining success, money, and personal care. Get ready to pull back the curtain because here, you are both patient and physician.
Hello and welcome to The Patient Physician. My name is Paul Smith and I am joined today by my co-host, Chris Fulbright. How are you today, sir?
Good afternoon, Paul. Buddy, I am doing great. I am super excited about this one. This is going to be a fun conversation.
I always get excited about guests, but as you were saying just before the show, it's just funny how life is that you're talking about something, it's out there in the universe, and then here we are. We were talking independently about some of the questions and things that we'll hopefully be able to cover in today's show. We are joined today by Dr. Ben Edwards. Dr. Ben Edwards was inspired to be a small town country doctor while growing up in Belton, Texas, watching both his granddads. They were both old school general practice doctors taking care of the entire town. Now, after medical school, he and his wife, Jamie, moved out to West Texas, where he was the only doctor in the county at Garza County Health Clinic. After 7 years of practicing conventional medicine, a divine appointment opened up his eyes to root cause resolution medicine. He is the founder and CEO of Veritas Medical and Veritas Wellness, headquartered out of Lubbock. Welcome to the show, Dr. Edwards. How are you today?
Thank you, Paul. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show.
As I mentioned, Chris and I were talking about some of the things that are really connected to some of the work that you're currently doing. But before we even get there, why don't we just jump back a few years and start with kind of one of the things that we touch on with all of our physicians who are in practice and what that motivating factor was for you to even become a physician and how your early career evolved into this current work.
So early on, like you mentioned, my granddads were the two physicians in town. So I just grew up watching these guys take care of the whole town from cradle to grave and impact everybody's life so profoundly. And, I just had that in me. I just wanted to help people. That's probably the generic answer most doctors give you, but that was it. I went to undergrad at Baylor, and part of me didn't think I was smart enough to make it to med school. Part of me didn't want the financial burden of all the debt, and part of me didn't want, so much time still, 4 more years of med school and 3 or 4 years of residency, fellowship, maybe after that. So I actually changed my major 5 times. I was looking for something else besides medicine.
Wow.
But I just couldn't get anything else to satisfy that thing in you that, that you really want to just do. So I finally gave into the call. But so it was really just that. I wanted to be like my granddads, impacting lives positively like they did in a profound way. So went to UT Houston and then Waco Family Practice. And then I knew I for sure wanted to do small town, nothing against the big city primary care guys. I know you can help a lot of people that way, but I wanted to actually deliver the babies myself, not the obstetrician do it. I wanted to set the broken bone myself, not the orthopedic, as long as they were uncomplicated basic things that a family practitioner could be trained in, do the colonoscopies myself, do the minor procedures. So that's what Waco trained me to do. Went out to Garza County to do that. So that was kind of really the start of it, just wanting to help people, plain and simple. Both my granddads are MDs. 2 uncles are MDs. Great-great-granddad was an MD. I didn't know anything about anything alternative to that. I didn't know about osteopathic medicine, chiropractic medicine, naturopathic medicine, which there are 8 states, I think, if last time I looked, 8 states in the United States that recognize and license naturopathic NDs. It's a full medical school. It's residency. They have prescriptive authority. They can order CAT scan. They're doctors. They just have this naturopathic understanding and education. Well, I didn't know any of that. Zero, zilch. I didn't know what a chiropractor even did. A very, very standard, conventional, straight allopathic. So just for that background, because leading into what I do now, obviously, I've expanded, I like to say, just the tools in my toolbox. Nothing against a prescription pad. I have nothing against that. I wrote a prescription just before I came on this podcast. I'm not anti-conventional medicine. I'm anti-uninformed consent conventional medicine. I'm anti-write that prescription, hand it to the person in a 7-minute visit and go off to the next one. where you didn't have the time to tell that person that you just wrote a prescription for Nexium, 40 milligrams, one a day, number 30, 6 refills. Here you go. See you later. Because you have too much stomach acid causing your heartburn. Number one, that's false. Number two, putting someone on that pharmaceutical to treat a symptom is going to increase their risk of lots of things down the road. That's well documented, actually on the black box warning and on the warning labels, but you don't have time to go into all that. And just a little tangent real quick. One of the first things I learned when I did some continuing medical education outside the conventional mindset was that the signaling to your lower esophageal sphincter, that's the pressure valve that should squeeze tightly shut all the time, that keeps your food in your stomach and the acid in your stomach instead of coming up through your esophagus. But in the stomach, the pH, if you just ate your lunch, your pH right now should be a 1 to 2. Battery acid's 1.5. You can't get more acidic than a 1. It's humanly impossible to make too much stomach acid, except for an exceedingly rare syndrome, Zollinger-Essinger syndrome, where you can make too much acid, but I've never seen it. Most doctors will never see that in their career. And the signal for that valve to squeeze shut is a pH of 1 to 2. As that pH rises, and stress will turn off your acid pumps. High sugar diet turns off your acid pumps. Not enough minerals in your diet, which are foods demineralized, and everyone's thinking low salt is healthy, low salt diets. But there are certain things that will cause that acid pump, to not engage fully, not put enough acid into the stomach. pH will be in that 3 to 4 to 5 range. Well, that diminishes the signaling to that valve, so you don't get a tight squeeze. You get a loose squeeze, a weak squeeze, and then more likely to open. That intra-abdominal pressure below opens it up, and boom, that 3 or 4 or 5 pH stomach content, still acidic, anything below 7, comes up and burns you. So to actually resolve that, Nexium's just turning the pumps off all the way. So now you don't have any acid. Valve's still wide open. You didn't fix the valve. You just shut off the acid so you don't have heartburn anymore. You think you're good. Well, you happen to need stomach acid to break proteins into amino acid building blocks to absorb them. B12 can't absorb it without good acid. You can't absorb a lot of the minerals without good acid. Your probiotics further downstream need good acid to thrive. Acidophilus, acid loving, that's a probiotic. So the point being, in a 7-minute visit, I don't get to explain all that, teach all that, dive into the stress and the high sugar diet and the demineralized diet, and give the truth about salt and the truth about real food versus processed food and the truth about stress. That takes time. So no one has that time. So this is a system problem. I'm sorry, I kind of went off on this tangent because where I was going was, I'm a conventionally trained doctor. But what I got to understand over 7 years of treating these patients conventionally with my 2 tools, the tool is a prescription pad and a scalpel. That's what United States trained physicians have, the 2 tools in their toolbox. And it's fine. There's a need for those. But we need other tools too, is what I came to learn. And unfortunately, the assumption I made, in fact, it was a deadly assumption, but the assumption I made, and I think a lot of doctors make this assumption, is when I walked across the stage at MD Anderson, UT Houston Medical School, got that diploma, got my white coat, got my MD behind my name, I'm going out to residency and then off into the world to help people. The assumption I was under was that I just got taught by this really, really great institution of conventional medicine. I just got taught everything there was to know to go help people. And now looking back, after 13 years of integrative medicine, after the first 10 years of conventional, now 13 years of integrative, I see that was an assumption I should not have made. There are other tools in the toolbox that we can put in there that are beneficial for the patient. So that's the number one. But so in the 7 years at Garza County Health Clinic, I was really, really good at those 7-minute visits. Waco Family Practice actually has a great little business class they teach their third-year residents of how the money side and the business side of insurance and Medicare and Medicaid and billing and coding and all the things. It's great. I subscribed to Medical Economics Journal back in the day. I still remember an article there. It sounds crazy, but it was an article from that journal. It had a tip on how to stay efficient in a primary care clinic. And the tip was have your nurse get some duct tape and make an outline on the floor with tape coming out of your exam room 1, make a little path into exam room 2 and another little path into exam room 3, and just don't get out of that path all day long. Don't step across that line and socialize too much at the nurse's station or take too many bathroom breaks or other breaks. I mean, it was halfway joking, but halfway true. So I knew how to do that 7-minute visit. I knew how to do procedures, and that's what pays, volume and procedures. Plus, I did the county jail and the juvenile detention center doctor contract with those 2 institutions, and the nursing home and the Friday night football game team doctor and house calls. So I was doing lots of other stuff, but the revenue came. So Medical Group Management Association put us in the top 95th percentile of all clinics in America as far as revenue and overhead and expenses and all that. And Washington Post came and followed me around for a week, observed all this. Here's how you can make a small town government clinic, basically, Medicare, Medicaid being the main payers in that county. Here's how you make it work. So we're on the front page. The county healthcare district is now out of debt because we're self-sufficient. We're actually generating revenue. So the tax money coming in just sits in the bank account and grows to the tune of $1 million was in their healthcare district savings account. $1 million brand new county clinic. They paid for it. That banknote was paid off in a year. So now we have a brand new state-of-the-art clinic, $1 million in the healthcare district bank account, and front page of the Washington Post. So things were going super great. Living my dream, small town, country doctor, raising the family, 4 kids at the time. And I thought everything was just great. And if a little
so then you
lady,
shifted though to conventional medicine, from conventional medicine to this focus on root causes and integrative. Now, when I was reading the bio at the very beginning, there was a couple of words, divine appointment. Now, was that something that you can share? And what specifically was that? Was behind that caused you to move in this direction?
Yeah. So like I said, I knew nothing about alternative anything and wasn't looking to know anything about that. I thought that I was all kind of quackery. If a little old lady at Garza County would have brought into her visit with me a little newsletter from a naturopathic or chiropractor that talked about some herb or supplement or iodine or whatever, I would have been polite because I try to be a polite guy. But ultimately I would have said, Miss Smith, you're probably just wasting your money. I mean, if that herb worked for that condition, they would have taught me that in school, which that sounds super arrogant. But that was, again, that assumption thing. So I would just say, probably it's not going to hurt you. Take it if you want. You're making expensive urine, stuff like that. So that's where I was at. So that divine appointment was actually a nurse practitioner I had at the time who had celiac disease, had been diagnosed years ago. So he avoids gluten like the plague. If he even gets a whiff, cross-contamination, he won't even scrape the eggs off a burrito and just eat the eggs because of that cross-contamination. He would have severe pain, inflamed gut, bloody diarrhea, be sick. So, he ate full-blown celiac. Well, he goes one weekend with his wife just to get away for the weekend up to Amarillo, a bed and breakfast up there. And he told the lady in the bed and breakfast who was making the breakfast that he needed a gluten-free pancake. And that lady said, okay, we can do that for you. But there's a doctor here that could probably cure you of that. You might want to talk to him. Yeah, that's what my nurse prac did. Just like Chris,
that's pretty gutsy right there.
I need the address for this bed and breakfast already.
Yeah, right. So he laughed at her. You don't cure celiac, and kind of blew it off. Well, she kept bugging him, pester all weekend. And the doctor's little concierge medical practice office was right there in the same building, in the same bed and breakfast building.
Oh, wow.
So the lady just kept bugging him. So to be polite, he said, all right, I'll talk to this guy to get you to shut up, basically. Well, he sat down and talked to this doctor who turned out to be an MD, PhD, ex-Marine, just high-powered dude. And this doctor, they ended up talking for about 4 hours. And he said some things in that visit that struck a chord with my nurse practitioner as, maybe there's something to this. and it's all natural. It's not going to hurt to try some of these techniques and things. So I'm going to do it. And so he did. Now, he didn't tell me this at the time that he was doing this, but he proceeded to implement some of these things. And over the next 3 to 4 months, I did notice that my nurse prac, he was trimming up. Wasn't real overweight, but a little bit fluffy. And he was trimming up that edematous, inflamed look. His complexion was better. His mood was better. His eyes were brighter. Just seemed more energetic and lively. And he was telling me his personal times on his bicycling. He was a cyclist. He was hitting these personal records. Like, man, he just seems like he's really getting fit and healthy. And then after about 3 or 4 months, he dropped the bomb on me. He's like, Doc, I didn't want to say this until I knew for sure, but I'm pretty sure I've cured my celiac. And I laughed. Like, is it April Fool's or something? I mean, what are you talking about? You don't cure celiac. And basically get back to work, And he was kind of offended that I wasn't curious or wasn't happy for him. He went to the break room, got a breakfast burrito that a drug rep had just brought that morning, brought it out and ate it right in front of me. Then he went to the local hamburger joint, Holly's Drive-In, got a burger for lunch, brought it back to the nurse's station, ate it right in front of me. And then Slayton Bakery cookies, a drug rep brought. And he ate those right in front of me, all in one day, 3 different gluten exposures. And he's telling me that he's going to be fine. And he was. He didn't get sick. He didn't go to the bathroom. He didn't call in the next day. He was good. And of course, I'm starting to think in my mind, what in the world? This is going to be a delayed reaction. Just wait till tomorrow. Or maybe you were misdiagnosed. You weren't really celiac. I actually called his dad, who's a doctor and was part of the diagnostic process, and confirmed it was a true diagnosis. I just couldn't believe it. Started just trying to, maybe he had this weird miracle cure. God just cured him, one-off kind of thing. But he's telling me the whole time, no, doc, did you know gluten's a protein? Did you know the stomach acid breaks down proteins? He said, imagine putting a piece of protein into a vat of battery acid, a pH of 1.5. That battery acid is going to dissolve that protein down to amino acid building blocks. And there's 94 different species of probiotics in our gut that we know break down gluten. So perhaps if you could get your pH back to the 1 that it should be, and you could populate your gut with a diverse microbiome, your average American is down to between 3,000 and 5,000 different species, where an ancestral tribe eating ancestrally, living ancestrally, like in the Amazon rainforest, they're up at 30,000 species. So we've lost diversity.
Wow.
But these were things he was saying, and that's what he learned from that doctor. Is there some stewardship stuff you could do? He started to learn about epigenetics, the BRCA gene, the ApoE gene, all these genes that predispose us to things. Not denying they're there, but can you keep those genes turned off? Genes are books on a bookshelf. What's causing them to be opened up and read or expressed? And the literature is clear on this now. It's these external things. Epi means outside or above the genes. And these things that'll turn genes on and off. So there was just so much more depth to it. And I can't go into all the things that take too long, but basically there were some nuggets of truth in here and facts and scientific evidence-based that convinced my nurse prac to do this, and he did. And so anyways, ultimately, that was a decision point for me was, hey, looks like this really happened. Like he's better. He's symptom-free. Let's just say remission. Let's not use a big cure word. That's an inflammatory word. He's in remission. He did some diet and lifestyle things to put this thing in remission where he can handle some wheat now and not get sick immediately. So what am I going to do with my next celiac patient? Because I'm going to have another one come in the door one day. Am I going to give them my standard conventional answer, which we do, standard of care, Texas Medical Board rules say I give standard of care recommendations. So we do that. But Texas Medical Board Rule 200 also says complementary and alternative medical advice can also be rendered if you've given the standard of care initially. So anyways, when my next celiac patient comes, am I just going to say eat gluten-free the rest of your life? That's what the books tell me. That's what the gastroenterologist tells me. That's what MD Anderson and Waco Family Practice taught me. That's what the books say. Or am I going to give them the option. Option 1, gluten-free the rest of your life. Option 2, you could go talk to my nurse prac and learn what he learned and do what he did. Maybe it'll help you. Maybe it won't. Maybe it only helps 1 out of 1,000,000. Maybe it only helps 1 out of 100. Maybe it's whatever. I don't know. I don't have the published data to tell you, but it helped him. And it kind of just made sense, and it's all natural. It's not going to hurt you. It's probably going to help other health outcomes when you do some of these healthy things. And so I decided to do that I would give the option with those caveats of it may not work. I don't really understand it. Don't know about this. I only got 2 hours of nutrition in 4 years of medical school education. So I can't really speak to this thing. So that was the point right there. But then the next level to that was, hey, this is a nurse prac, not a doctor. He's my nurse prac. He's under my license. I kind of got to know what he's saying behind closed doors to these patients. Let me call this doctor in Amarillo that taught him all this stuff. So I call this doctor up. And of course, like most conventional, kind of arrogant. I don't think I'm naturally arrogant. Maybe I am and don't know it, but medical school automatically kind of breeds that a little bit into you. And then you're expected to be the smartest guy that knows everything by your community. Anyways, so I call this guy. I'm like, what in the world? Who are you? What kind of quackery stuff, hocus pocus stuff are you doing? So he started just hammering me with some stuff. And, it'd take an hour to just go through that. But some of the highlights of it were, Ben, there's really no such thing as diseases. They're all consequences. They're all modern, meaning over the last 100 years, basically. The first heart attack in America was in 1912, and there was only one in the whole country.
Yep.
And there were 0 in 1911 in all the years prior to that, at least recorded in the medical literature. And now it's your number one killer. 600,000 people a year are going to die from it. How do we go from non-existent to one to all the way to where we are now in 100 years? And lung cancer was so rare, every single case got published in the early 1900s, got published in the medical literature. Autism, first case ever in 1934. Now it's 1 out of wherever we're at now, 29, I think. And he just went right down all these modern chronic diseases. There were no such thing as chronic medications pre-1960-ish. And of course, my first thought was, well, yeah, it's because modern medicine, saved us. Pre-1900, the life expectancy at 1900, 36, 40 years old, which that's probably what Google will say if you go Google this. But if you look a little deeper, there should be an asterisk on that 40-year-old lifespan at 1900. Actually, the truth on that is the infant mortality rate was 50% at the turn of the century. Half the babies were dying before they turned 5 years old. So if you had twins, one's going to live statistically not make it to 5 years old, but the other one's going to live a normal lifespan up to 80. And the average on that's going to be 40. And it's clear, Harvard, Mayo, Hopkins, Boston University, multiple researchers, multiple publications show that drop in infant mortality from 50% down, it dropped 99% from 1900 to 1950, pre-vaccines coming on the scene. And so the head of the Infectious Disease Society of America, the founding president and founding editor of that journal, Harvard Medical School Dean, Ed Kass, Kass, he published on this. He looked at all that data, as have others. And they've all concluded the same thing. It was improved nutrition, sanitation, clean running water, sewage treatment plants, refrigeration, all the modern technologies that during the Industrial Revolution weren't present. So as he started bringing this truth to me, and I said, what do you mean no such thing as diseases? Because that's what he kept harping on. They're all consequences. Well, I just grabbed my list of diseases I'd seen that day. I saw 40 patients that day. I had my schedule right in front of me, and I just went right down the list. And, depression, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, asthma, heart disease, all the things. And he said, no, they're all consequences. Go take your list tonight. Here's your homework. Your first homework assignment, the first one he gave me out of many, was go home and Google the word inflammation next to every one of those diseases. So inflammation and depression, inflammation and asthma, inflammation and diabetes, inflammation and cancer, inflammation and heart attacks. And he was right. There was a connection between inflammation and all of these chronic diseases that are all modern. And he said to me, you need to be a good doctor, which means be a good detective and dig a little bit and figure out where is inflammation coming from. If you can figure that out, resolve that inflammation, perhaps these symptoms that we call diseases, high levels of glucose in your bloodstream is a symptom. We call it a disease called diabetes. High blood pressure is a symptom. A tumor is a symptom. Blockages in your coronary artery are a symptom. Migraine headaches are a symptom. I'm so convinced of this now. At the time I wasn't, but now I for sure am. There's symptoms rooted in dysfunction at the cellular level, mitochondrial dysfunction. The mitochondria is our carburetor that makes our energy in the cell. And that's where inflammation comes from. If you have a carburetor that can't make enough energy, enough miles per gallon, and is making way too much exhaust, the black smoke coming out the tailpipe in the human body, those are free radicals. But if that engine is doing this in the cell, and you have hundreds of engines or mitochondria per cell, thousands in some cells, and if they're all not tuned up, and your miles per gallon, your ATP production is down and your free radical production is up, that's it. That's an inflamed cell. And that inflamed cell, you stack enough of those together in a tissue group, a muscle group, an organ system, say your brain, you're not going to fire those neurons off as efficiently. You're not going to be able to remember those figures and names and equations and all the things. Memory starts to go, brain fog, some people call it. Or if that's in your pancreas, if that anywhere, you will get dysfunction of that organ. If your white blood cell is sluggish and not full of energy and has too much free radical exhaust, it cannot go identify and kill cancer cells or COVID germs near as effectively as if it were a really dialed in, tuned up mitochondria. That white blood cell that's tuned up, it is amazing. It will get after it and it will find cancer and COVID and flu and tuberculosis and everything else. So that's kind of a long answer. And it took me a year. So for any physicians listening that this maybe kind of makes sense, well, it was kind of making sense to me too. But then that other part of my brain would kick in and I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, there's no way this could be true. And especially when this doctor in Amarillo told me type 2 diabetes is totally reversible. Just probably every time, almost every time, if not every time, reversible. And this is in 2012. Maybe now in 2025, maybe doctors kind of see that or understand that. Hopefully they do. But in 2012, it was like, what in the world are you talking about? You don't reverse type 2 diabetes. That's a chronic progressive disease. And I went to the American Diabetes Association's website and I screenshotted that phrase on their website. It said that type 2 diabetes is a chronic progressive disease that will need to be managed with diet, medications, and eventually insulin. That's what they said. That's what I believed. I told that doctor in Amarillo that, and he said, no, it's not. It's a consequence of mitochondrial dysfunction. Be a good doctor, dig deeper, and fix the mitochondria. And then he said, just go home and Google this guy. And I don't remember this guy's name. I just remember he's an engineer, African-American, middle-aged guy, type 2 diabetes. His A1C was in the 11s. And he laid it all out on YouTube, his journey. And he reversed his diabetes in a matter of months with diet and lifestyle stuff. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, his A1C was totally normal, off meds. And I told my wife, I woke her up in the middle of the night, I was watching all these videos and said, this guy just reversed his diabetes. That's amazing. And if this is true, because half of Garza County is diabetic and the other half is going to be diabetic in a matter of time. I diagnosed a 7-year-old in Garza County with type 2 diabetes. And when you're diabetic, as we all know, probably, you increase your risk of Alzheimer's and cancer and heart attack and stroke and, of course, dialysis and amputation and blindness and all those things. So if you can actually reverse that, then you just mitigated that person's risk of cancer and Alzheimer's and heart attacks, all the top killers. Amazing. So that really, really got me kind of thinking. But cognitive dissonance kicks in. This can't be. How could this be? If this were true, MD Anderson, Waco, American Academy of Endocrinologists, They'd be teaching me this stuff. They'd be saying this stuff. How can you, up in Amarillo, one little doctor, yeah, you're an MD, PhD, ex-Marine, pretty high-powered dude, but still, how could you be right and all these other doctors be wrong? The American Diabetes Association be wrong. And what I came to understand over time, and I'd encourage my colleagues who might listen, is to understand that it's not a matter of wrong or right. The way we were trained in the American Diabetes Association statement actually is right and correct if you choose that option. If you choose to treat a symptom, high blood sugar, that's what the pharmaceuticals do, and even the nutraceuticals, berberine, it's an herb that'll bring down blood sugar, head to head with metformin, your number one prescription for type 2 diabetes. They've done studies, peer-reviewed, published, berberine versus metformin. They both dropped the A1C to, closer to 7. But that's still just, the focus is wrong. The blood sugar coming down. That's just treating the smoke, not the fire. That's like sitting on your living room couch. Your living room's filling up with smoke tonight while you're watching TV. Well, you can hop up off that couch, open the windows, the doors, get the fans going, clear the smoke, and then just sit back down on the couch while the fire's burning in the kitchen. Well, you're going to burn your house down. You're going to suffer. You're going to die early. And it turns out Victor Montoya, Mayo Clinic, this is like 2016. He had the idea. He's an endocrinologist. I wonder if this metformin and these other drugs I'm giving to lower the A1C down to 7, I wonder if that's translating to decreased mortality, decreased heart attack, decreased stroke, decreased dialysis, decreased amputation, blindness, and neuropathy. He scoured the literature, and the conclusion of his article was, no, it doesn't. And it's the same with heart disease and cholesterol. You can take a statin to lower the number on the paper, get your LDL in total below those goals. Does that translate to decreased heart attack, stroke, and death for primary prevention? The answer is no. Decreased all-cause mortality with statins as primary prevention. And this was American Journal of College of Cardiology. I believe it's March of 22. This statin data, systemic review, 0.8% reduction, absolute risk reduction for all-cause mortality with statins. For heart attack reduction, you're at 1.3% all-cause reduction, and stroke, 0.4%. And you can go across the board. Amyloid beta plaque theory for Alzheimer's and those drugs for that do nothing. You can look at osteoporosis drug, takes 7 years, 1,000 patients, you'll have 8 fractures in the treatment group, you'll have 12 fractures in the placebo group after 7 years of the bisphosphonate drugs. So we get very minimal all-cause gains with symptom treatment. We feel better because the numbers look better on paper, but Americans die younger than anyone else. We're sicker than anyone else. We take more drugs and do more surgeries than anyone else. We utilize this system more than anyone else to come in dead last place. Highest infant mortality rate, highest maternal mortality rate, highest all-cause mortality rate across the board. Any way you slice this thing, we're super sick, die younger than any industrialized country, and it's getting worse every year. And it's costing more every year. So when that doctor told me, Ben, because when I said, this alternative medicine, he said, you're dang right, we need an alternative. Look at these stats. Who wouldn't want an alternative to being the last place team every single year? If Texas Tech had the highest athletic department budget, the best multi-million-dollar facilities, and the number one recruiting class every single year, and came in dead last place in the Big 12 every year, out. No, that AD, that head coach, they're out. Nobody's going to put up with that.
Yeah.
But we put up with that over and over and over every single year. Sorry, I'll let y'all talk.
No, this is fantastic. We started in the beginning. The conversation you're having right now, it is, I think I used the word ironic before. That's probably not even strong enough. Paul and I mentioned, we were in the Houston community yesterday.
Medical center. In the
medical center yesterday, literally, and one of the doctors, as we're going through it, holds up a piece of paper and says, I have 38 people to see before the end of the day. It's that same scenario you just described. You got the 7 minutes. You got to do it. It's the way they're trained. Again, this is a systematic deal. I want to make sure we have enough time to get to your 4 pillars. But I want to circle back on something that I found in your video that was fascinating to me. I can already tell we're going to have multiple podcasts with you. So you talked about gene theory before in your video. You talked about where we just say, "Oh, that's part of who we are. That's my mom, my dad. This is what happens." Can you spend a couple minutes just talking about gene theory? And if you want to work in germ theory as well, I was fascinated by that. And then I want to get to your 4 pillars, because I think both leading people to your website, helping them understand your program, having them be able to see from a natural aspect what you're doing to help people. But do you mind touching on that?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not going to deny there's gene involvement, but they're secondary. And a few places I'd point people to look at. First, there's a book called The Longevity Plan. Dr. Day, I think it's Charles, but Dr. Day wrote this amazing book. He's a cardiologist. At the time, he was in his mid to late 40s. He was on like 8 pharmaceuticals for various things: acid reflux, depression, arthritis, high blood pressure, maybe. I don't remember. But he went to China to give a lecture, cardiology lecture. He was over there, and in conversation with his colleagues in China, they discovered, man, you're a pretty sick dude for being in your mid 40s. What are you doing on all these meds? And you kind of look sick. And they encouraged him to go to this village. The nickname of the village in China is the Longevity Village. And because people are healthy there, they're not overweight, they don't have disease, and they live to be 110, 115 years old and healthy, not demented, not in the nursing home, active, physical. They go to sleep one night and just don't wake up when they die. They just literally die of old age. So he went and he observed, of course, their lifestyle, their sleep habits, their exercise and nutrition and all the stuff. And he wrote all that up in his book. But then he took it a step further and he drew their blood. He did a big sampling of blood, and what he was looking for was the ApoE and the BRCA and all the genetic predispositions. And what he found was they had all those genetic predispositions too, but they didn't have the diseases. And this topic, it's a huge topic, epigenetics. So I'm just going to give a few examples. Dean Ornish, UCLA, professor and physician out at UCLA. This was some years ago, probably 10, 15 years ago. Prostate cancer patients. He got the biopsies of those prostate cancer and saw the oncogenes were turned on. The prostate cancer GROW gene was flipped on, being expressed. The cancer suppressor gene was turned off. He put these folks through a number of months, I think 6 months, diet and stress management, went back, did another biopsy, did genetic studies on it. The cancer suppressor gene had flipped on, and the cancer oncogene or the GROW gene had flipped off, and their PSAs were trending down to normal. There was another study. This was agouti mice. So agouti mice have a gene mutation that causes them to be obese, and their fur turns to yellow instead of brown like it should be. And so this is a known breed of mice that the scientists use in the lab to study obesity and diabetes. Well, someone had the idea, let's feed this agouti mouse mom who has this agouti gene. Let's feed her in her rat chow some extra B vitamins. So they did that pre-conception. Then she gets pregnant, has babies, and they all come out normal, brown fur and skinny. They're not obese, even though they still have that gene, the agouti gene. They're still agouti mice. Something about that B vitamin changed genetic expression. And so as we look back at chronic disease, genes don't change this fast. When you look at the Pima Indian, Southeast Arizona Native American tribe, pre-World War II, you can find 0 documented cases of type 2 diabetes. And then today, 50% of their tribe is diabetic. We see this in the Aborigines in Australia. I mean, the government spent millions and millions of dollars on programs trying to deal with the Aborigine diabetes explosion, until 2 young kind of social entrepreneur filmmakers came in and said, why don't you just teach them how to eat what they used to eat, what their grandparents were eating? And they did. The diabetes went away. And Weston Price saw this in the 1920s. He was a dentist in Cleveland, Ohio, and he observed this in his dental practice. High blood pressure, arthritis, malignancy, this thing called heart attacks, myocardial infarctions were starting to exist. They didn't exist before. In this 1920, he tells his wife, something's going on here in America. People are starting to have these things called diseases. And we need to go travel the world and try to find some people groups that don't have these things, these diseases. So they did, spent 10 or 15 years, traveled the world, 14 different people groups all over the world, wrote a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. Thick book. It's pretty much the Bible of nutrition medicine, in my opinion. And this is Native American tribes in Canada and Alaska, Eskimos, South Pacific Islanders, Amazon rainforest, British Isles, Swiss Alps, Africa, 14 different groups. And what he observed, if the people were eating their native diet, they had zero disease. But once they switched to what he called modern food, which was processed white flour and processed sugar, he noted within one generation of that happening, chronic disease was setting in. Even noted tuberculosis resistance is what he called it. There were tribes or villages that would just be impervious to tuberculosis. It was in the country, in other villages close by. It was ravaging certain villages. And he noted, the villages that are close to a port where they get easy access to white flour, white sugar, or a Western missionary had come in and lived in that village and brought in white sugar, white flour, those were more susceptible to tuberculosis. So it just became real clear that the gene component's there, but genes don't change as fast. It's all about the epigenetic component of toxins, nutrients or lack of nutrients, stress, lack of sitting. I mean, one session of exercise, it's like 98,000 different molecules they've measured that upregulate with just one session of exercise. We know clearly from placebo and nocebo trials, there's a massive, Harvard even published, is the Harvard Mind Body Institute. They concluded somewhere between 78 and 98% of all chronic disease actually starts in a thought. And a thought rooted in anger, bitterness, unforgiveness changes the structure of the DNA. That double helix DNA tightens up, changing genetic expression. That's from a book by Dr. Caroline Leaf, Switch on Your Brain. So, I mean, this is getting way out there if you're totally conventional minded. I mean, this could sound crazy. A thought impacts genetic expression. B vitamins impact genetic expression. Glyphosate, which is Roundup. We're in Roundup Ready Cotton Central out here in West Texas. You breathe enough glyphosate in, that's going to alter genetic expression. The evidence is overwhelming at this point. It's just hasn't trickled down into medical school curriculum and into the doctor, on the corner at your primary care doctor's office or even your cardiologist's office. So, it's a new and emerging field, but it's actually been around for over a decade now of pretty high prominence, is epigenetics.
So this is a stupid question, but what's keeping that from happening faster if all this evidence is out there?
Yeah, people won't like this answer because it's conspiracy sounding, but pharma, money. That's the only conclusion I can come to. When the truth is so obvious, not only in peer-reviewed published data, but anecdotally, which we're not supposed to look at anecdotal reports. In fact, evidence-based medicine pyramid says anecdotal is the very lowest form of evidence, pretty much shouldn't even be on the pyramid. Don't listen to any stories that are just grandma, did something and her diabetes went away. So this evidence-based medicine thing, in my opinion, got pendulumed way too far, heavy to one side, meaning randomized controlled trials is all I'm going to look at. When you really go back and study the original authors of that definition of evidence-based medicine, it was a combination of the best available peer-reviewed published data, along with the clinician's experience and expertise, along with the patient's values. And patient values trump clinical experience, and clinical experience trumps peer-reviewed literature. Doctors today have totally forgotten that original definition. It's all about peer-reviewed. So all you got to do is corrupt the peer review process, which has been pretty well documented now. That's not me saying it. This is Marcella Angel, former New England Journal of Medicine editor-in-chief. I think it was 20 years she was editor of that journal. And Dr. Robert Horton, editor-in-chief, Lancet. Both of these guys, you can go look up their exact quotes, but basically they both say the same thing. You cannot trust these randomized controlled trials. They've been corrupted for various reasons, but mostly money-driven. So it's just the fact, if someone does start digging into this, Dr. Ioannidis out of Stanford, Nobel Prize winner, I mean, he said over half perhaps the vast majority, I believe is the exact quote, of today's peer-reviewed published literature is false, is wrong. There's publication bias. There's all kinds of corruption. So it's just unfortunate. We got to admit this, confess. The only way to turn this thing around is start with confession. Just get it out there, admit to it. And we have a hard time doing that as human beings on anything, much less doctors. But that's where we got to start. I mean, guys, we're in last place. We're the sickest, and our outcomes are not getting any better. So I think we've got to separate and get more independence in our medical school education funding, in our laboratory research funding, our hospital funding, and our politician funding, and our FDA funding. If pharma is going to fund all the above that I just mentioned, then there's probably going to be a bias towards pharmaceutical products. But I challenge any physician out there to find any chronic disease that's rooted in a deficiency of a pharmaceutical product. You ain't going to find it. Migraines are not from a deficiency of Imitrex, and heart attacks are not from a deficiency of Lipitor. That's the wrong way to go. It doesn't address root causes. You're leaving your patient open and susceptible to other unintended negative consequences down the road when all you do is chase that symptom, that smoke. You got the fire burning in the kitchen.
It's a pretty fascinating, the timing of all this, as Chris was saying, because I just had my brother in town. I hadn't seen him in years. And we had, as a company, recently done a retreat, and everybody had some interest around learning how to make sourdough. So I had my sister come in and teach everybody just for a fun thing, but the purity of it and eating sourdough and just not feeling as bad afterwards. But then he came in town and he was expressing like, yeah, I'm doing this too, but I just bought this grinder so that he could buy the wheat just as pure as he can get it so that he can grind it. And he's trying to explain to me about just even that part, from the time that you grind it to the time of consumption, you're losing nutrition. And it just, I know this is a far out piece of the bigger picture of what you're really addressing around nutrition, but just that small piece of really the time and how it's done. He's going to that extent to send me a whole video of his grinder and now grinding it down to flour so he can make his own bread. But just going back to that way of doing things, very basic. So hearing all this and going, wow, is there another way? How much closer can you get to just going back to the better way to consume nutrition?
Your brother is absolutely on the right track.
I'm not telling him that, by the way. He's an attorney, and his mind and his brain, he's already gloating.
Does not need validation.
Nope. No. He does not need an ego boost.
Okay, well, I'll still say I'm the breakfast guy in my house. I cooked waffles this morning for the kids, and I went to the 5-gallon bucket, got a scoop of wheat berries. That's what the wheat is called, wheat berries, and threw it in my grinder that sits on the countertop, hit the button in 20 seconds. I had my flour, and I made our waffles with it. I made dinner rolls last night, super quick and easy. Once you get the hang of it, it's no problem. But there's deep nutrition in that roll, that pizza crust, that waffle, which we make all that, and it's not that hard at all. There's a learning curve, but then it's easy. But there's 40 different nutrients in that wheat that you're consuming. It is an absolute superfood, nourishment for your body and your soul. But what they did in the early 1900s, the millers figured out they could sift that and pull out the germ and the bran, which the wheat germ oil, when you grind that, your brother's right, that wheat germ oil gets exposed to the air. It's going to start to break down and oxidize and go rancid. So you do need to consume it pretty quickly. And therefore, it has no shelf life. Well, they figured out they can sift that portion out, and all that's left is the white flour, which is just a starch and a protein only. Well, there's zero nutritional value, no vitamins, no minerals. And the people actually started getting sick when they ate this kind of white flour back in the day. But that's where it all started. And so that's what we teach. Try to get your nutrition back to how your great-great-grandparents were doing it. We call it the 5 superfood groups, and fresh milled grain is one of the superfoods, as is fermented food like sauerkraut or sourdough, raw dairy, homemade bone broth, and organ meats, which people turn their nose at, beef liver. But that's what our ancestors did. Deep nutrition in those 5 food groups. Avoid the big 3. Seed oils, that's the canola, soybean, all the polyunsaturated fats or PUFAs. These vegetable oils, Avoid that, avoid processed grain and processed sugar. You move the big 3 out, put in the big 5, and that you'll start to fix yourself. But that's just one. You mentioned the 4 pillars. Nutrition is one of the pillars. Hydration. You dehydrate your disc in your back, the cartilage in your knee. Think of a plum versus a prune. You don't hydrate well, all that stuff shriveling up. You got back pain, knee pain, whatever. And that's just one thing. But nutrition, hydration, movement, and peace. Chronic fight or flight, your mitochondria, that engine I was talking about, inflammation. You want to jack up your engine and decrease the miles per gallon, increase that exhaust. Throw chronic fight or flight into your system. I don't care how good you're eating, moving, and hydrating. Chronic fight or flight is not compatible with long-term health. So what we have seen over the years, when you address all 4 of these foundational things, the mitochondria, your carburetor, suddenly begins to perform for you like it should, like God designed it to. And when you perform high-quality mitochondrial performance is high ATP production, that's cellular energy, low exhaust, that's free radicals. And suddenly, the right genes are staying turned on and the wrong genes are not turning on. And your detoxification pathways work better and your regenerating pathways work better. Stem cells are already in us. They're supposed to wake up every night and start to repair from the oxidative stress damage from everything you did today. But we got to have deep sleep. We got to have minerals. We got to have oxygen. We got to have deep nutrition. So it's all 4 of these things coming together. Nutrition, hydration, movement, peace produce a healthy human being. And then you don't need to clear the smoke. And I'm not, again, just want to wrap up by saying for conventional guys, the smoke clearing, most people in a house fire die from smoke inhalation. So clear some smoke, that's fine. If someone's burning every night with heartburn, then fine. Give them a little Nexium for a couple of weeks, but then go a step further and teach them how to turn their pumps back on so that valve will close and then get off the Nexium. That's what we try to do. Get on metformin if you need to, but that's just treating a symptom. Let's get down and fix your mitochondria so you know how to burn sugar again for fuel. Because all that drug's doing is causing you to urinate out the extra sugar. It's not fixing your carburetor.
So if we can, I want to actually talk about that last pillar, the peace, but I want to go a little bit further into that in one of your more recent episodes, because for everybody that's interested, Dr. Ben has a podcast called You're the Cure. And we'll put that in the show notes. But you had an episode, Never Be Sick Again, with Chad Gonzalez, and had woven in spiritual identity and how it relates to healing. And I thought that this was very interesting. But then earlier you just talked about how this one thought, this one negative thought, or hate, or anger, or that can alter things. And I'm just wondering how much that ties in. But really, more specifically, how is your own understanding of spiritual identity shaped the way that maybe you practice medicine, or how do you teach that? How does that come up in conversation with a patient if you're trying to, weave that into working with a patient, if this is one of the pillars, and even the more complex piece that not everybody has the same spiritual background.
Yep. Yeah. So it's very patient dependent. It's so individual and unique. And so regardless of anyone's beliefs, backgrounds, they don't believe. And even if you don't believe, well, you're believing in something. Even if the something's nothing, then nothing came from something. So it's very individualized. But in general, I'll give you my thoughts. For most people, my approach is going to be a little more scientific because we tend to be a left brain, logical, rational, prove it to me, evidence-based. Where's your proof kind of society? And quantum physics does bring a lot of the proof, actually. But the autopilot nervous, so we have the voluntary and the involuntary parts of our nervous system. So voluntary, that's the nerve that controls my bicep. It's not going to move till I tell it to move. My jaw, it's not going to move till I tell it to move. But then we have the involuntary, this muscle inside my chest, it's beating, squeezing every second for the rest of my life. I'm not telling it to do that. So the involuntary, that's called your autonomic or autopilot nervous system. That system runs in one of 2 gears, first gear or second gear, rest and digest or fight or flight. And so as I teach this, it probably too long for this. We have to do a part 2 to go deeper on this part.
Maybe even 3 or 4. I had
could
a ton of questions.
Could be more, yeah.
We didn't get
Once Paul's brother hears that you complimented him, that'll be a whole
We're in trouble
right there.
We're in trouble. He is a brilliant guy, but I'm just not even going to carry that compliment to him.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I got 2 brothers. I know how it is. But that autopilot nervous system is actually under the influence of or programmed by your heart beliefs. So
Wow.
regardless of your religious background, we have beliefs about ourselves. And I'll just give a kind of practical example. If at some point young, and usually it is when we're young, like 6 years old, an event happens in your life where you interpret that event, say, all these kids are laughing at me, and I have a thought, well, they don't like me, they're rejecting me. But these events come where we take it deep, a deep personal identity belief that's not true, but we think it's true. So if I believe I'm rejected, that's going to drive an emotion in my soul of wanting to be loved and accepted. So now I'm extra, extra sensitive for any body language or verbal language from anybody that says, I accept you, I like you, I love you. So in our culture, first grade, you go to school, and that first 6 weeks, you make all A's, and your name gets put on a little deal in the newspaper, at least in the small town I grew up in. It did. So everybody at church the next week said, I saw your name in the newspaper, all A honor roll. Good job, little Benny. Keep it up. Well, that made me feel accepted and loved. So I'm going to do that again next time. And you do that every time. And you layer that on with, you get first place in the arts, craft, and science fair and get a big trophy. Hey, good job, good job. You get MVP of a soccer tournament in first grade. Hey, really good job. So you get confused, or a belief that you have to perform. It's a performance mindset. In order to be loved, accepted, you have to perform and be number one. And then I picked up on the fact that if I keep everybody happy, like my teachers, then they give me positive vibes and good feedback and smiles and hugs and stuff. They like me. If I keep my friends happy, my coaches happy, my Sunday school teachers happy, my parents happy, well, that's a people-pleasing mindset. Now, these are heart belief. These are layers of things. I'm seeing the world through these goggles of a core identity. I'm rejected. Now, man pleasing and performance on top of that to keep that emotion from me feeling that thing. So I'm going to live my life now making decisions through those goggles. And we get a little messed up because we think we got to get all our circumstances just right for us to be at peace. It's the goggles. You've got to interpret your circumstances through truth goggles, not these lies. And it's so intertwined with our identity, our self-worth, and our value. So it's obviously a real personal journey, spiritual journey, but most sick people are really open to that. And what I believe is happening, it's just my personal belief, that mitochondria that's burning your fuel for energy to make ATP and not as much exhaust, I think there's a vibrational frequency it resonates at, kind of like a tuning fork. You hit it, or that opera singer hits that note just right, it shatters that chandelier. There's a frequency when you're walking in true peace and truth that mitochondria just goes to another level. And it's able to process fuel for energy much more efficiently, is what I believe. I don't know that I can prove that, but so it's beyond just stress management. That's not it, because that's not dealing with your core belief. So again, it's a real personal journey. But yeah, I think as we understand more and more, clear up who the creator is and who he says we are, those two question marks, we get that more cleared up, you can walk in true peace despite your circumstances.
I did not think that this was going to go this direction. It's fascinating, just all the pieces. And it just leaves me with so many questions and curiosities that we had a ton that I just know that we're not going to get to. But I was sitting here thinking, when you're going through all this stuff, obviously it's hard, especially in today's environment. Chris said that the physician we saw yesterday had 38 patients, and this is normal. It's normal to have to see that many people. There's no way in the current setup that you can go through any of that stuff with somebody to talk through all those things. There's just no way to really treat somebody. So you're just forced to go through it as fast as you can and throw some medication almost at them and say next, right? It's damage control than much more than it is really trying to like fix the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's symptom management. It reminds me when my wife had a slow leak on her tire one time, and I didn't have time to fix it. So I just aired it up. We had an air compressor. I just aired it up, and it was a really tiny hole. So it took 4 days for it to get flat again. And so on day 4, I aired it up again. And I just kept doing that over and over because it was so quick, so easy, so cheap. My copay covered it. But I wasn't thinking about the unintended long-term potential things that, the life of that tire is probably going down because of the way it deflates and you're driving on it. The alignment was probably getting off. I don't know about
Well, the
shock
tear is
struts.
getting bigger, the hole, yeah.
Yeah, and increase her risk for a blowout and a rollover probably, and could have died. So all those negative long-term because of the quick fix, quick, easy. But yeah, it's a system problem. Number one, the doctors aren't trained in nutrition or lifestyle or any of this root cause stuff. They don't even know it. Number two, they don't have time. Even if they start to learn it, they don't have time to implement it. Number three, standard of care isn't any of this. Number four, the reimbursements aren't tied to any of this diet and lifestyle stuff. It's awful. So, and the doctors are probably under the assumption, like I was, that all these higher ups, all these recommendations and protocols that come down from the different institutional bodies, whether it be CDC or AMA or I don't know, American Heart Association and the Association of Pediatrics and Gynecologists and all the boards that bring recommendations to the doctor on the front line. They're just trusting that all those boards are smarter than them, looking at all the evidence, putting it all together and feeding these protocols to the frontline doctors that are just the best. And, so we don't have time to go actually dig on our own into the evidence. We trust all these bodies and institutions.
And why wouldn't you? There's lots of evidence and lots of people before you. My God, these people have been doing it so much longer. I'm the young buck.
Well, they're the experts, right?
Right.
I mean, they're held up as the expert. You're going through medical school. These are the people that are going to teach you. These are the people you look to. Study this, learn this. If you don't do it this way, you either don't get paid, you get in trouble. So we learn. Go back to your age 6, right?
Yep.
This is how you do it. Well, I've learned now, if I follow these rules, there's a good result. If I don't, it's a negative consequence, right? You lose the peace, as you talked about, if you go this other direction. So,
and that's what I came up against when I started to be introduced to this other stuff, this alternative stuff.
Yep.
It was a year, a hard year of being faced with a lot of stuff that resonated in a part of me. It totally resonated. This is true. This makes sense. And he can point to stuff like I can go to my physiology book and see that, he's right. Gastric pH, 1 to 2. That's the normal level after a meal. But then I was faced with that reality of, well, man, I don't have time to talk about this with the patient. And actually, that's what happened after I did start to learn all this. And I didn't mention this part. The final piece for me after a year of arguing, basically, that doctor said, I'm tired of arguing with you. Just send me your 10 sickest patients. The ones that are so sick, and you've already referred them to all the specialists, and they're back in your office. They've been to UT Southwestern, the smartest of the smart in Texas, no offense to UT Houston or Baylor. But they've been to all the specialists, and they're still back. They're not better. Send me those. The ones that when you see them on your schedule that day or they walk in, you see them on the waiting room, you kind of cringe on the inside because you ain't got nothing for them. Your worst lupus patient, your worst fibromyalgia patient, your most depressed patient, your brittle diabetic, maxed out on oral meds, time for insulin because he's uncontrolled high sugar and he refuses insulin. Like all your hardest ones, send them. And I did. 10 super sick, super hard, tough, been everywhere, tried everything. And they all, 10 out of 10, came back well. I'm talking no more diabetes. Off their meds. This guy was on triple therapy, oral hypoglycemic agents, diabetic meds. He's a coach, 74-year-old coach. Time for insulin. Coach refused. I'd rather die. I'm just sitting in my recliner anyways, neuropathy. I have shortness of breath. I can't. He was 330 pounds. I said, well, there's this doctor. He doesn't even believe in a disease called diabetes. If you want to go see him. And that guy jumped on it. He said, yeah, where's he at? How can I get to him? And that dude came back in 4 months and his A1C was in the 5s. He was off all his meds. Not only did he not go to insulin, he stopped his 3 oral meds and he was off his heartburn med, cholesterol med, blood pressure med. The guy was well and he had a tear in his eye and he said, Doc, thank you for sending me up to that guy because now I got my life back. I can get out in the garden and pick the garden with my grandkids. So that was it for me. My patients, 7 years with these patients, they're my patients. I prescribed these meds. I referred them to the specialist. I knew these people, went to church with them. My kids went to school with, it's a small town. They're not lying. They're not making this up. I witnessed this, even though it's just anecdotal. And that was it. I told my wife, these people got well. I've never seen people get well like this. I went to med school to help people get well, and I have never, ever, I've got to do this. I've got to learn more about this. I went to the hospital board and I told them, and these are all my friends. They're my patients. They're just farmers in the community that make up the hospital board. And I said, guys, you won't believe this. Acid reflux is reversible. Diabetes is reversible. Lupus can go into remission. Like it's diabetes. And, I just can't not do it. And I said, I won't make a big deal about it. I'm not going to go give a speech about it. I'm not going to put advertisements about it. But if I'm in a patient room, one of the 7-minute visits, if I'm in there and that patient says, hey, doc, word on the street is you helped somebody reverse their diabetes. Will you help me do that? I'm going to say yes. But I'm going to also say this takes an hour to do. Really, it's 2 hours now. But anyways, you're going to have to make a follow-up appointment for an hour and then we'll do it. And I told my receptionist at the front desk that I was doing this. I said, I'm telling you, if a patient comes up here to check out and says, doc said, give me a follow-up for 1 hour, I want you to give it to him. So I went and told the board, hey, if enough people ask for this and we're saying yes, I am going to say yes, then I'll go from 40 a day to 8 a day maybe, meaning the money is going back in the red. So fair warning, here's what's coming. I'm doing it. And of course, I'm sounding all brave about it. Inside I was nervous and I got to scheming. I thought, man, if I could find another doctor, get him in here to just run them through like cattle the old way. And I found one actually. He was burnt out. He's in another small town and people were knocking on his door at night. He was doing all the small town country doctor stuff. But I found this and he said, yeah, I could come in. I'll do 8 to 5 clinic. I don't want the nursing home, the juvie, the county jail, house calls, Friday night football game. I don't want any of that. You do all that. You do your nutrition stuff and I'll do the clinical. So that was my plan. But the management company out of Lubbock at the time is called PNS, Physician Network Services. And they had contracted with the county to manage the business. And that management dude was like, 2 doctor salaries on this clinic. And they're not going to use a new guy for a long time. They'll sit on a waiting list to wait for Edwards. The new guy's going to sit there, twiddle his thumbs for months. The money, we can't do it. Fire Edwards. So that was a Friday afternoon. They fired me. I was out by Monday morning and the used office furniture store in Lubbock and bought a used office desk, 2 chairs, a laptop. I'm all in for $500. I bought one of those little square card readers, put it on my phone and opened a business checking account and started seeing people. In the Farm Bureau agent had an extra office that she leased me for $100 a month. I was paying this rent at the Farm Bureau Insurance in Post, Texas. And that's where Veritas Medical started. Veritas is Latin for truth. I told my wife that night, I said, this is just a truth with what we're learning. And let's look up Latin for truth. And that was it. VeritasMedical.com was available as a website. So I had my first website, my first own personal email, business checking account, and my own business just started. And that was 13 years ago. And it grew and it grew and it grew because there's lots of sick people, like my 10 real sick ones that all got well. There's a bunch of those kind of patients in this country. And they'll find you. They're desperate. And they found the word of mouth spread. And so then I started hiring nurse practice to help me because I was too busy. So at our prime, we got to 4 clinics, Abilene, San Angelo, Odessa, and Lubbock, 9 nurse practitioners. And that was at our prime. But what became super clear was, and we always had a long waiting list. And I thought, man, at this waiting list, if they could just go to health coaches while they're waiting and learn the 4 pillars, and then when it's their turn to see the nurse prac or doctor, maybe they won't need to. Or if they still do need to, it'll be much easier, quicker, and less doctoring. And that turned out to be the case. Wow. So Veritas Wellness was born. That's our wellness company. It's outside the authority of the medical board because we're not practicing medicine. It's staffed with health coaches doing diet and lifestyle counseling. It can be across state lines and international lines. We're in 6 different countries, all 50 states now. So it's an online virtual wellness program that we have. And all we do is renew the mind, renew the mind, renew the mind. The truth sets you free. We teach. The Latin root of doctor is teacher. The founder of Hopkins and the founder of modern Western medicine, Sir William Osler, quoted as saying one of the first duties of the physician is to teach the masses not to take medicine. And so that's what we do. We support and teach how to get to the root cause. And that's all diet and lifestyle. A doctor cannot cure you. A doctor can only treat a symptom. So on the medical side, we treat symptoms pharmaceutically. We treat symptoms nutraceutically. There's some great things in the alternative integrative functional realm. That's fine. But in a lot of ways, that's the green version of treating a symptom. And it's fine. I mean, I'm not against symptom treatment. We do it every day. But we tell the patient, informed consent is, all I can do is treat symptoms. You want to do it pharmaceutical? You want to do it nutraceutical? Get back to your health coach to address the 4 pillars so that your body can fix itself. The podcast name we have, You're the Cure. It's not a gimmick. It's the truth. Your body is designed to fix itself. Give it what it needs, avoid what it doesn't, and it will get it done.
This has been amazing, really. And we're going to have to, Chris, we're going to have to get Joe to book another session if that's okay.
I told you I was
Dr.
excited.
I mean,
yeah, I wasn't joking. This is
so
fantastic.
basically through this whole time, we got through the first question, just
That's
how
right.
you got to start.
How
Veritas.
did he get here? And then he started with the 4 pillars. Maybe
Okay,
we
we've
got
got
into
2
it.
questions done.
Yeah.
So we'll
Hey,
try to book
good.
more time with you. But I do have one last question for you. You know that the name of the show is The Patient Physician. And my question for you is, what does that mean to you?
Wow. Good question. Well, I believe if you are a patient or have symptoms, you would be well advised to become your own physician. Nothing against your doctor. But as you've heard from this podcast, your doctor was trained very narrowly. And so you take personal responsibility for your health. Only you can steward your mitochondria, your carburetors. So in order to not need a physician, you have to become your own physician and you have to become educated. So the patient's responsibility is to educate themselves, and a physician's responsibility should be to teach and to get to the root cause. So to me, that's patient-physician.
Wow.
Take personal responsibility and walk this thing out yourself. And again, that can sound like anti-doctor, or if you are a patient on a lot of pharmaceuticals, don't be condemned at all. I'm not saying that. Like I said, I write prescriptions, but just understand there's more to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a more excellent way. There's a deeper thing to get to where you don't have to be a standard American health statistic. You do not have to be one of this group that dies younger than anybody else. You have an option. It's your choice, but you need to be informed. And that's what I was trying to do today, give you a little bit of nugget of information so that you can make some wise decisions with your health.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Edwards. And thank you to listeners for listening to The Patient Physician. If you enjoyed today's story, please like and subscribe. And please also share your story with us because there is somebody that is patiently waiting to hear it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards.
You're welcome. Thank y'all for having me.
This conversation was brought to you by Physicians Resource Services, a firm supporting medical professionals to improve their financial situation and pursue their personal and professional goals. The Patient Physician is produced in Austin, Texas. Editing and sound design are in the hands of the PodConnects podcast network. Please email questions or show ideas to info@physiciansrs.com.